we've got another event going on over at Texas Tech. Thursday, September 17th, it's Constitution Day, and over at Texas Tech, they will be featuring Dr. Hadley Arkes, and Dr. Arkes is joining me right now here on the Chad Hasty Show. Dr. Arkes, welcome to the show. You'll be speaking over at Texas Tech University on Constitution Day. How are you?
That's right. Well, thanks for having me on. So this is the Free Market Institute that's connected with this particular bit on radio, huh? Okay.
Well, that's who we had on in the previous segment, and now you're joining us today, of course, to talk about your speech over at the Helen DeWitt Jones Auditorium. This, of course, over at the Museum of Texas Tech, and tell folks a little bit about what you're going to be speaking about on Constitution Day.
Well, it's really about the principles that were there before the Constitution, and that would be there even if there were no Constitution. It's interesting that Barack Obama gave this talk the night he was elected president, and he said, "We've built this country Khalistan by Khalistan for 221 years." And a friend of mine at LSU wrote me the next day. "Did you see?" He said 221. He counts the beginning of the country in 1787 with the Constitution. Lincoln said at Gettysburg, you may recall, 407. If you count back 407 from Gettysburg, you find the beginning of the country not with the Constitution, but with the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. The principles of freedom and natural rights contained in the Declaration. Now, Mr. Obama rejects the notion of natural rights. He rejects the understanding of the founders that there were certain rights that arose from the very nature of human beings that were distinct, that would be the same in all places where that nature remained the same. And the purpose of a Constitution then was to find some practical way of bringing those principles into a weave of action or practice. This Constitution is the second Constitution. In other words, the country didn't begin with the Constitution, and the Constitution is not the source of the principles that mark this Constitution. So it's a way of trying to bring us back to the understanding of the founders who were there before the Constitution, who drew upon those principles as they made the Constitution. And one of the problems today is that people just latch onto the Constitution, what they think is the Constitution, and they read it without those underlying principles. So what we're going to be doing is trying to recall how that first generation of founders made their way back to those principles. You know, my friend Greg Katzis, when he argued the first day of the argument against Obamacare three years ago, raised this issue from John Marshall to say it may be as wrong to impose upon people a contract they did not want, in this case Obamacare, to force them to buy medical insurance they didn't want, that it could be as wrong to force people into a contract they did not want as to impair the obligation of a contract they had willingly made. And just the story later said of that argument, that principle would be there even if there were no Constitution. So what we're going to do here is just try to recall to people how the American founders thought about these things and put them and brought us back to try to restore that understanding of the American founders for a new generation of lawyers and citizens.
Visiting with Dr. Arkes, and you've done a lot of work on the Born Alive Act that was enacted back in 2002.
Oh, you know about that?
Absolutely.
Oh,
and
we're going to the floor again with that on Tuesday.
Well, and that's something that I wanted to ask you about is abortion, and we've seen a lot with Planned Parenthood, obviously in the news. Congress
right.
going to be debating all of this. Where do you see right now the debate on abortion? Where do you see it going? And in your mind, and I know you don't necessarily get up there and want to set all kinds of policy as far as the budget goes, but you do have a budget showdown over Planned Parenthood. What would you advise lawmakers to do about this?
Well, on the budget, Well, I'm not sure it's worth about shutting down the government over something like this, because you're not actually shutting down abortion. You're just trying to bar funding. I would rather approach the issue with a separate standalone bill on these things, so that, for example, what we're doing with the Born Alive Act is returning to it, because we're talking now, again, just to recall to your listeners, that it was the most modest first step on abortion. It was a move to protect the child who survived an abortion, after a federal judge told us we couldn't do that. Well, we passed that bill, but the chairman of the Judiciary Committee stripped the penalties from the bill at the last moment to avert a veto from Bill Clinton. But now, over the years, we've discovered that a lot more babies are killed who survive the abortion. We have nurses with stories to tell. We've had the killings in Philadelphia. And we've had, as you say, the revelations from Planned Parenthood. What we're doing now is going to the floor with a move to restore the penalties, because no Democrat voted against that bill, back in 2004. They went along with it. Now we're going to put the question to them. You agree that this is something heinous here. This is something you voted to forbid. Now tell us, how grave a wrong do you think it is? What kind of a punishment do you think is warranted for somebody who kills a child who survives an abortion? Tell us. Now, we think that should stand as a separate bill, so the Democrats are forced to take a position one way or another on it. I think that's the sort of thing that would get confused if we simply make it part of a package in which the Republicans are accused of shutting down the government. I'd rather avoid that kind of confusion over that.
Where do you think that the public is on abortion?
We know that for years. I remember that one figure was about 60% of the public were opposed to 90% of the abortions performed, under the current laws. And yet most people did not want to see Roe versus Wade, that critical case, overruled. And you put those together by the fact that most people don't know what's in Roe versus Wade. Most people don't understand that under Roe versus Wade you can have an abortion right up until the time the baby comes out. And in fact, what we dealt with was the fact that you can have the baby killed even after it does come out. That is, the claim was that the right to an abortion is the right to an effective abortion. The public opinion, there's been no more than about 22 to 24% of the public over the years that would support the current law of the right to kill the child in the womb for virtually any reason at any time. But the problem is it hasn't broken through. And one of the things we're trying to accomplish with this bill was to restore an old understanding and say that if the court can articulate new rights under the Constitution, the legislative branch must be able to vindicate the same rights in the same clause in the Constitution where the court professes to find them, and in filling them out, marking their limits. The one thing that shouldn't be tenable under this Constitution is that the court can articulate new rights and then assign to itself a monopoly of the legislative power in shaping those rights. So what we're saying in this bill is, whatever it could have meant by Roe versus Wade, it could not have meant the right to kill a baby who survives an abortion. And we could come back, once we get that on the table, we can come back later and say whatever it meant, it could not have meant you can kill a child because the child may be deaf, because the child may be afflicted with spina bifida. In other words, the public opinion has not been supportive over the years of the current laws, but we haven't been able to break through to change those laws in any serious way. So what we're trying to do is put something on the table that would give us a lever here for beginning to roll back Roe versus Wade, and cut it back and leave it as a kind of a shell with the substance removed.
Visiting with Dr. Hadley Arkes, who will be speaking over at Texas Tech at the Helen DeWitt Jones Auditorium, the Museum of Texas Tech, on Thursday the 17th. You will be there at 1:30. Should be a very interesting speech about natural rights and about the Founding Fathers and about how they arrived at the Constitution, and I think that's going to be a very interesting conversation, very interesting discussion, and hopefully we'll get a lot of people out there to hear your speech, and I appreciate you taking some time this morning to come on the show.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Have a great time here in Lubbock.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's Dr. Hadley Arkes. And you can also visit the website jameswilsoninstitute.org for more information. He is and Dr. Arkes is actually the president of the James Wilson Institute on Natural Rights and the American Founding in Washington, D.C. So a very interesting discussion that'll be held on the 17th at 1:30 over at the Museum of Texas Tech.